Okay, good evening. Welcome to tonight's shir. So the first shir this evening is entitled Yishmael, Yisrael, and the power of Tefilla. Given the situation we're in with the whole circumstances in Eretz Yisrael, Hashem should have Besuras Tovas, I thought this would be an interesting area to explore. We will not, you've got the handout, you can see clearly we're not going to be able to get through it all this evening, so it will spill over till next week, possibly the week after. But I think it's some very interesting ideas that I'd like to discuss, and then it will give us a bit of focus. I think it's interesting, speaking to my siblings in Eretz Yisrael, there's a nervous energy in Klal Yisrael now. It's very scary times, and the energy is generally being channeled in a very positive way. The amazing achdus, the volunteering that is happening in Eretz Yisrael is quite astonishing. And I think the purpose of this is to perhaps take our energy, our anxiety, our fears, and to channel it in a more positive direction. And Tefillah, I think, is certainly one area which could be explored. And I mention this because there is a very interesting Pirkei Rabbi, which maybe you've heard, but it's worth looking at. The pasuk says in Parshas Balak, if you're looking at the handout, if you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. The pasuk in Parshas Balak, where Bilam gives nevuas for the future of the world. He says, "Vayisam mish'alav vayomer oy mi yichya misumay kel." Oy mi yichya, woe to the person who will live misumay kel. What does that mean? What does that refer to? So the Rabbeinu Bachai says the following: Al derech hamedrash, oy mi yichya misumay kel, al Yishmael. That is a reference to Yishmael, the father of sort of the Arab world. Oma Bilam. Mikol Shivim Loshan Shebara HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ba'ilamai, of the 70 nations that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in his world, Loisom Shemai El Yisrael V'Lishmael. He actually only put his name in two of those nations, in Yisrael, the last two letters, and Yishmael. How do I know that with regard to Yishmael? Shenemar V'Karosa Shmo Yishmael, that you should call his name Hashem, called Yishmael in last week's parsha. He was the one, it wasn't his parents. All of you, all of us, our parents chose our names. But here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose Yishmael's name. V'kiven shehishva HaKadosh Baruch Hu shmei shel Yishmael, the shmei shel Yisrael, oy mi yichya mishum misumayel, oy mi yichya b'yom, woe to the person who will live in those days, kach darsha b'Pirkei Rabbi. That's how the Pirkei Rabbi explains it. What you see is that the very name, and of course the nation of Yishmael, is wrapped up with Tefillah. Yishmael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should listen to their prayers. And I'm sure you've seen it. Sometimes you go to the airport or you go to a public place, and they generally don't have any qualms about davening in a public place. They take out a mat and they would daven. Their koach Tefillah is very clear. Interestingly, the Gemara in Brachos says, Brachos nun vav amud beis, haroya Yishmael b'chaloim. If someone, the Gemara there in Brachos, there's 2 or 3 blots which just deals with dreams, fascinating Gemaras, with all aspects of dreams, what the interpretations, if you see this in a dream, what it means, etc. The Gemara says there, if you see Yishmael in the dream, tefillos nishmas, that is a sign that your tefillahs will be answered. V'davka, continues the Gemara, but Dafka Yishmael ben Avraham, avutaya ba'al malay, but not a wayfarer, not a person who is a stum person. It's Dafka Yishmael ben Avraham. So you see that the koach HaTefillah is very real. I'll tell you something astonishing, that Rav Moshe Shapira remembered, this is very interesting, because he spoke to an old man who was the attendant of the Maral Diskin. Now, the Maral Diskin died in 1898. So Moshe Shapiro only died a few years ago. So maybe in his youth, he met an old man who knew the Maral Diskin. He was his shamas. And the Maral Diskin, Bishur Leib Diskin, who was the Rav previously in Brisk and then in Yerushalayim, told him the following astonishing thing, that we're familiar with the halacha, that if you're davening Shemona Esrei, you're not allowed to walk within Daled Amas, within 4 Amas, 2 meters of someone davening Shemona Esrei. So when you're davening Shemona Esrei and you take a step back, you should look behind you, but make sure that you don't take 3 steps back into the 4 Amas, the Daled Amas of a person. Why? Because the Shechina is there. Either that, and it always disturbs the person, but the Shechina is within Daled Amas of a person davening Shemona Esrei. Says Rav Moshe Shapira that Maral Diskin said that is true as well for an Arab. So if he would be walking the streets of Old Jerusalem in the late 19th century, and he would sit, and there would be an Arab praying in a public place, his shamus knew to tell Maral Diskin that the Maral Diskin would not be walking in front of that Arab who was praying. Why? Because they're also praying to the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's a monotheistic religion, and therefore the Shekhinah is there, said the Maral Diskin, and therefore they shouldn't walk within Daled Amos of that Arab who is praying. An interesting thing, astonishing idea. So on one hand, it's scary. Woe to the person who's going to live in those days because of the Keach HaTefilla of Yishmael. The consolation, of course, from the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer is that there are two nations who have the Shem of Hashem in their name. Not just Yishmael, but also, of course, Yisrael. And that should give us tremendous chizuk, because the Keach HaTefilla is incredibly powerful, and that needs to be harnessed to help us, if you like, get us through these days. Take a look at the Keach HaTefilla. This is what we'll focus on this evening. And then, Mitzvah Hashem, next week we'll talk about other aspects of Tefillah and strategies in Mitzvah Hashem to try and improve our focus in these times.
What is Misuma?
Misuma Kel, from the it's a difficult word to translate, from the name of Kel, the shame, don't know exactly. The Gemara Shabbos says something amazing. Omer Rav Yehuda Marav. This is relevant to last week's Edra. Min nayin she'ein mazal Yisrael. How do you know that there is no muzzle for Yisrael? We know that the muzzle means the zodiac signs, sort of you're submitted to nature. How do you know that doesn't apply to the Jewish person? Shenema, as it says in last week's Edra, Vayotzei oisei hachutza. Kodesh Baruch Hu took Avram Avinu out. What does that mean? Oma Avram mitnei Kodesh Baruch Hu ribono shloilom. Ben Beisi Yeresh Oisi. I haven't got children, he said. So my servant Eliezer is going to inherit me. Omaloi, so he said back, no, love. Ki im ashayetzi mime'aich. You're going to have a natural biological child. Omalafon Rebbeinu Shalom, istakalti b'stagninus sheli, says Avram Avinu to the Rebbeinu Shalom, I've looked in my sort of star signs, my astrological future, ve'eni roya loheli ben, and I'm not able to have children. Amalei, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to him, "Tzei mi'istagninus shelcha she'ein mazal Yisrael." Go out of your star sign because you're not governed by it. Ein mazal b'Yisrael, you're not subordinate to it. Says Rashi, how so? Ein mazal b'Yisrael, says Rashi, ta'al yedei tefillah v'zuchus mishtane mazal l'tova. It's through tefillah. Through tefillah, a person can change his mazal. That's what Rashi says. Another idea. This is an astonishing idea. The pasuk says in Parshas Vayishlach, "Vayihi b'nei Yaakov shnei masa." Yaakov Avinu eventually builds his family, 12 children, and the pasuk lists it: "B'nei Leah b'char Yaakov Reuven v'Shimon Levi v'Yehuda v'Zachar Zvulun," the 6 sons of Leah. "B'nei Rachel Yosef v'Binyamin," or "B'nei Vilha Shivchas Rachel Don v'Naftali," or "B'nei Zilpa Shivchas Leah Gad v'Asher." Those are the 12 sons of Yaakov Avinu. These are the 12 sons who were born in Padan Aram. End of pasuk. Asks many of the Mefarshim, it's not true. Not all 12 of them were born in Padan Aram. Why? Because Binyamin was born in Eretz Canaan. The others were born in Padan Aram. Says the Ibn Ezra, Asher Yulad Padan Aram, Ashteyos noldu lo-sham. Ashteyos means 11. 11 of them were born there. Why? Ki Binyamin noiled be'eretz Canaan. Binyamin, like I just said, was born in Eretz Canaan, not in Padan Aram. V'hakosov al aroiv. It means the majority. It doesn't mean all 12. That's the Ibn Ezra. Says the Chizkuni, an astonishing idea. V'hari Binyamin loy noiled loy be'Padan Aram. Same question. Elahochi ka'oma. Asher yulad loy al pi hatfila shen nispal l'rochel be'Padan Aram. Wow. That he was born in Padan Aram. How so? Because that's where Rachel davened for him, and that's really where he was born. Where was the biological birth? Oh, okay, that was in Eretz Canaan, but that's not where he was really born. He was born because of the tefillah of Rachel. Shenema Yosef Hashem li ben Achi, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give him another child, and therefore Ma'ale Alof HaKosov ki'ilu noiled bePadan Aram. Astonishing thing. The tefillah is actually the reality of the birth. Similar idea. The Mishnah says in the beginning of the 9th parak of Brachas, Harayim Mokum Shenasu by Nissim Yisrael. You see the place where Nissim happened to the Jewish people. You make a bracha, Baruch she'osa Nissim lavuseinu b'mokum hazeh. Fine. Says the Bartanura, the premier commentator on the Mishnah, what does that mean? Where are these nisim? So he gives examples. Kagoin Ma'avoris Yamsuf, where the Klal Yisrael passed through the Yamsuf. That's a place where the miracle happened to the Jewish people. V'nachle Arnoin, or Mavras HaYarden, etc., etc. And ve'even sheyoshev oleh Moshe Vashalom k'shalsu milchama ba'Amalek. And so too, the stone upon which Moshe Rabbeinu sat when they did battle with Amalek. That's where the miracle happened. The miracle happened in the battlefield. He was sitting on top of the mountain looking down over it. What do you mean if you see the place where they vanquished Amalek? So then in the battlefield, that's where you make the bracha. Says the Bartanura, no. The Even Sheyoshev Oleh Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? Because that's where the real battle took place. Moshe Rabbeinu davened for Klal Yisrael. That's where it actually happened. So you see, this is really what the Koach Tefilla is. That through Tefilla, which is wrapped up in our very names, the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not just in the name of Yishmael, but it's in the name of Yisrael. And therefore, we also have a Koach Tefilla. We also can connect and are connected in a spiritual way. That Ein Mazal Yisrael, how does it change? Al Yedei Tefilla. The Bnei Yaakov V'Shnei Masah, how can that be? The answer is that the 12th son, he was born, says the Chizkuni in Padan Aram, because that's where the Tefillah was. That's how effective Tefillah can be. The real miracle of the vanquishing of Amalek happened on the Even Sheyoshev Oleh Moshe. And one final proof. Look at this. An amazing Gemara. The Gemara says in Brachas, Daf Yud Amud Beis, top of the next page, Amar Rabbi Chanan, Afilu Bal HaChalomes Omer Lo L'Adam L'Machol Meis. Even if someone, the astrologer tells you, I've seen in your star signs that tomorrow you're going to pass away. Al Yimone Atzmin Arachamim. Don't despair. Miyad, that is a reference to Chizkiyahu Melech. Because the Pasuk says, Vayasef Chizkiyahu Ponav El Akir Vayispal Hashem. He was told that he was going to die. So he turned to the wall and he started davening. And he davened to Hashem, remember HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Eis Asher Salachti Lefonecha, I walked Lefonecha be'emes, with honesty, u'belev sholem, v'hatov beinecha osisi, I did the good in your eyes. My hatov beinecha osisi, what was the good in your eyes that I did? Says the Gemara there in Brachas, Rabbi Levi Omar, Shegona Sefer Refuas. He hid the Sefer Refuas. What is that? There was a Sefer which had all the medical cures to all the illnesses and ailments in history. He had a book. Can you imagine? Can you imagine having this book today, where there are billions of pounds are spent in research to cure all types of diseases? Chizkiyahu Melech had a book of the Sefer Refuas. What happened to it? Tonu Rabbanon. Shisha Dvarim Asa Chizkiyahu Melech. 6 things Chizkiyahu Melech did. Al Shloisha Hoidula V'Ashloisha Hoidula. 3 things that he did, Hashem agreed with them, and 3 things not. What were the 3 that he did that Hashem agreed? Al Shloisha Hoidula, the first thing was, Gonna Sefer Refuas. He hid this Sefer Refuas. For Hoidula, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, well done. Why on earth did he hide it? We need it. Says Rashi, Shegona Sefer Refuas, Kadesh Yivakshu Rachamim. Because if you go to the doctor and you feel that if you've got an infection, you just need some antibiotics, and you walk in, you walk out, you've cut the Ribono Shel Olam out of the equation. We need to connect the whole time. And therefore, people weren't davening. So therefore, he hid it in order we turn to the real Rofei Koboso Maflilasis. And therefore, Kadesh Yivakshu Rachamim. And that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu agreed with him, it's worth hiding the Sefer Refuas in order that Kadesh Yivakshu Rachamim. That is the power of Tefillah. A fascinating concept, fascinating idea. So that is the Hakdama, that is the opening. Mitzvah Hashem, next week we'll talk about why Tefillah is so difficult, why we found it so challenging, and in Mitzvah Hashem, various strategies how we can improve our Tefillah. In Mitzvah Hashem, we'll continue with that next week.